Hey, welcome to another episode of Your Faith and Health Community. I'm your host, Pastor Jackie Jackson, and as always, on behalf of myself and our producer, Anita Alexander, I want to thank you very much for taking time out of your day to spend with us. Before we jump into the show, you know where I'm getting ready to go, right? Healthcare. Let me just ask a question. Since you've seen me last, how many people have gotten enrolled in healthcare that wasn't enrolled? Just what I thought. Somebody didn't. Listen, I've been singing this song for 2 years, and I'm going to keep singing this song till everybody is enrolled in healthcare. It is important that you enroll in healthcare. Let me make that plainer, that you get health insurance. That's whether you have marketplace insurance, that's whether you go get private insurance, whether you have employment offered insurance, or you have Medicaid. All of that is health care. All of that is health insurance. The good thing about Medicaid is there is no closed enrollment. You can enroll in Medicaid year-round. It doesn't matter what time. Now, where you run into an issue is if you have to get insurance through the marketplace. But if you've had a life-changing event, in other words, you've recently gotten married, congratulations, or you've recently gotten divorced, that may be a congratulations, I don't know. You've had a baby, you've started a new job, you just recently lost the job, recently moved into the state of Ohio, if so, welcome to Ohio, or you're coming home from a penal institution. You just recently were incarcerated. That's a life-changing event. Listen, if you remember last week, we had as a guest, and we have him again, Mr. Ali Rashid Abdullah, who has an initiative with Dr. Victor Garcia, where they're dealing with trauma in the communities. Mr. Rashid is also the District 5 coordinator for the Community Outreach Advocates, which is through the City of Cincinnati Department of Human Relations. And I also work there, and what our job is, among many things, one of the main things we do is we respond to homicides and shootings in the 5 police districts. And as a result of that, we see a number of people, children, adults, who are affected because of a shooting or a homicide that they're seeing in their community, sometimes over and over and over again. And I mentioned last week that we see some of the same people at, not always, but sometimes at some of these shootings or homicides. And it's affecting them even if they don't think it's affecting them. So Rashid and Dr. Garcia, they put together an initiative around trauma that's actually a community initiative. It's going to be in different communities, and their goal is to try to work with you and I and to make sure that we have good mental health, that we have the help that we need when dealing with traumatic situations. So welcome again, Rashid.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Tell us again about the program for people who didn't see last week.
Well, what we're trying to do is address the trauma that is taking place in the African American community, particularly the Cincinnati community as a whole, that has been not addressed by the professionals. We need to get people into these areas where people who are despondent. A good example, you see a lot of young Caucasian kids out west who are hooked on heroin. There is not enough, in my opinion, not enough people addressing that issue from the standpoint of why they feel so hopeless, so desolate, why they feel that there is no tomorrow, that they're willing to shoot drugs knowing very well those drugs could take their life. There's something taking place, there's something that has happened that has not been addressed. The same thing applies in many other communities where you have people who are just desperate. They're at a point where they don't care because they don't believe that they, when you talk to kids who don't believe they're going to live to be 25 years old, they try to get everything in their life now, today, by any means necessary. So you see extreme behaviors from some of the, from children, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old. The young shooters, the shooters in our communities are getting younger and younger. The young girls, in many cases, are just as bad as the young boys. And one of the areas that we want to address is molestation on the part of young girls here in the city of Cincinnati. One of the buildings that we'll be using will be the Old Cape School. We have a Dr. Futch at the Jacob Center there. One of the issues that we brought up was that 80% of the young girls that go to his school have been molested. 80%. These 80% are the ones that are willing to admit that they have been molested. This is not to speak of many young boys who also have been molested. This is a big thing, and it's been a big secret in the African American community for many, many years. And it needs to be addressed. It needs to first be exposed. It needs to be brought to the people in the community to recognize that they had to admit that this has taken place. What we're dealing with really that is really very, very difficult is trying to get people to acknowledge that they have issues. Getting people to acknowledge that they need help. When you're dealing with people who have been coping with these issues for so many years, it's hard to convince them that they need help. And if you can convince them, it has to be done by someone who they know, who they love, and who they trust. So we're trying to bring a process of healing, treatments into these communities.
Okay, and I also would probably go to venture that there are those of us who have been traumatized that don't even know that we're traumatized.
It's called vicarious trauma.
Vicarious trauma. Yeah. And I just want to read something here, and it's talking about trauma. And for some people who don't know what trauma is, or because you hear, sometimes words you hear, and if it's not something you're dealing with in your life, you may not understand it, or you may think it's something that's dealing with someone else. Or when you think of trauma center, sometimes people think more of an accident. If I'm not mistaken, UC Hospital is considered the trauma hospital. If you're shot or something along that line, that's where you go, but not thinking about it, say, from a mental perspective, but more from a physical perspective. So I just want to read what psychological trauma is. It says, psychological trauma is a type of damage to the mind that occurs as a result of a severely distressing event. Trauma is often the result of an overwhelming amount of stress that exceeds one's ability to cope or integrate the emotions involved with that experience. A traumatic event involves one's experience or repeating an event of being overwhelmed that can be participated in weeks, years, or even decades as the person struggles to cope with the immediate circumstances, eventually leading to serious long-term negative consequences. That's one thing I want to read. And then the other thing I want to read, because with all that, that's a lot of talk, and some of it may go, I sat and I read it slowly to make sure that I absorbed it, right? But when you're talking about that or thinking about that or dealing with your kids or your wife or husband or someone you love, how do you know if they have all of this stuff that I just read, right? So this is something that kind of gives you an idea if you're looking at someone or dealing with someone. It says, this gives you an idea if they're affected with this trauma. Negative changes in thinking and feeling. This can include feeling numb, blaming oneself or others, reduced interest in activities. So when you're looking at your children or you're looking at your spouse or your brother or sister, and you knew at one point they were very active, they had these things that they did, they were always on the go, and now they seem withdrawn, they seem no longer interested in the things that occupied their life and bring them joy, then that's a key that something's wrong. It's saying difficulty remembering aspects of the event, lack of ability to experience positive emotions, or feeling detached from others. That is something I think that's really deep. Lack of the ability, let me say that, right? Lack of the ability to experience positive emotions. And so when we're looking at trauma and we're looking at the people that we deal with every day, there are some people outside of our office. You see them day after day. Their joy seems low. They don't seem to necessarily have an interest in getting past that one thing that they're doing. And so this initiative, this program that yourself and Dr. Garcia have developed, this is to help communities who have that type of issue, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. It's people who have become hopeless. We see them every day, young and old. They have become hopeless because they see the same things occurring in their life day in and day out without any change. They don't see any intervention. They don't see how they can find themselves out of that environment. There are always those who can leave the environment. There are always those who can be successful, become doctors and lawyers, they move out to the $1 million homes. The great majority of
But
the people...
But let me just quote before you go further.
Yeah,
though,
I know.
Even with moving out of the community or moving wherever you're moving, doesn't get you.
They take it with them.
You can't leave it there. You don't get to say, well, I'm moving, so here you have to stay.
Well, the difference is it's not inflicted on a daily basis as it does those who are still there. So you have a better chance if you move outside of an environment that's inflicting trauma to be healed, as opposed to constantly living in that community, constantly being inflicted. You know, one of the issues with the healing process is, in the many trauma centers that we have around the city of Cincinnati, is that we can take you to the hospital outside the community, but when you come back,
you're coming right back.
You're coming right back to what inflicted that trauma in the very beginning. So if you don't address what's happening in that community, if you don't address the people that are creating that environment, if you don't address that, it's not going to change.
So in addressing the communities, my understanding is, with this initiative starting out, there are a couple of communities in the city that you're initially going to work in. And what communities are they?
We're going to work first with the Winton Hills area, the Winton Terrace area, because it's such a congested area with thousands of children, with thousands of people, with many single mothers who are struggling just to make ends meet, struggling to make things work on a daily basis, who are exposed to traumatic experiences on a daily basis. You know, when a child, and I don't want to exclude Chief Isaacs, which is a very important piece of this, because to foster a better relationship between law enforcement and the community, which is a big piece in trauma. Law enforcement officers are traumatized by a lot of these young men who are sagging their pants and carrying guns, as well they should be, and they should be. But these young men are also traumatized by what's happening around the country, where people, young African-American males particularly, are being shot, and they believe in a very unjust manner. So you have a trauma on both sides that needs to be addressed. We have this collaborative agreement, and I think we have to find a middle path. We have to find some way to address both conversations, and I don't think we've found that way yet. You know,
and so that's another. So that's
just another piece, and I wanted to bring that in because Chief Isaac understands that, and that's difficulty. That's very difficult. What people in Westwood, their feelings and what they're going through, is legitimate. It can't be denied. Those people are hurting over there too, as well as people in Avondale and other places. But I can be so obsessed with my pain that I'm not even trying to listen to what you're saying over here. And I think that's what's happening here in the city of Cincinnati. But we have the Jacob Center, the Old Cape School in Winton Hills, under the guidance of Dr. Futch, who will open up his school. We've talked to Laura Mitchell, the school superintendent, who is 100% behind this initiative. We want to begin there in the Winton Hills area, dealing with over 800 units, thousands of people. Have a place where people can go and feel safe, a place where people can go and know that there are people that are there to receive them, that love them. So
this center, so this isn't a program that's just bouncing in and bouncing out.
No,
so this center
it's not going to be just therapeutic. No, this is from the heart.
But I'm saying, but this is be like an actual brick and mortar center that's housed in those two communities to start
in the
off
communities. Beginning, the healing process must take place in the communities.
So with that, so let's look at this. So you're in the community, you have the program in the two. They're there, they're set up. what is the process from there? So since it's a community healing, the community is involved in the process, right? They're not sitting off to the side. They're actually involved.
They're the participants.
So they're the participants,
They're
but
the ones
also
that
you
is
have
gonna
some
work on the
training,
healing.
right? You have a community training part of the initiative, and can we talk about that a little bit?
Well, we have people that will come in with different training methods to help people identify and diagnose what is taking place. You know, I see a lot of people, I just say he's crazy. Well, there's some things going on that someone who's been trained can better identify what it is to get to the root of why he is the way that he is. The new question is not who you are, but what made you to become who you are. And once we begin to go to the root of what's taking place with people, we have a better chance of healing them.
So it's not what's wrong with you.
We see what's
Right, it's not what's wrong with you. It's what got you to where you are.
Right, and
but
that's
don't you have
what has not been addressed.
But don't you have something, or I may have got a misunderstanding, and it's possible. But isn't there some type of training for members of the community that
there
they
will
can
be
receive?
training? There will be training. We have people that will go into the communities to train the community leaders, the mothers, the fathers, the grandmothers, the people who the people in the community know and trust. Again, I emphasize trust. People will not divulge their secrets unless they trust you, unless they have faith that you are not going to divulge their business all in the street and are really there to help them. People don't come out of their communities. Example, African American men, we don't go to the doctor until we sick. We gotta get sick before we go to the doctor, physically.
Right.
When we have mental issues, we go to the grave with them. But those mental issues still affects directly our immediate families. Trauma begins maybe even when the child witnesses his father beating his mother, arguing with the mother. When the father leaves the home, when after the argument the police come and the police arrest the father. Trauma begins with things as simple as that. It's not always just gun violence.
Right.
It's not always just robberies and rapes and that kind of thing. It's things that we have taken for granted that is inflicting so much pain in this community. And as the one writer says, people who hurt people.
Hurt people?
People who hurt people. So you see a lot of people lashing out. The idea that I'm not going to live to be 25 years old tells me that I got to do what I need to do now. And whoever I hurt, it doesn't matter. I'm going to get mine. When you're dealing with poverty, now it's an interesting thing that I think Cincinnati is nationwide per population, one of the top cities in the nation dealing with poverty. How do you address that? Address the poverty. Children don't have jobs. Parents have jobs. If you give parents training, if you give them jobs, then you can remove that issue. You're talking about child hunger. Children don't feed themselves. Parents feed their children. So go to the parent. Let's deal with the issue for what the issue is.
Or at least we're hoping that they do.
Well, if they're going to get fed, most of the time it's the parent. It's the parent that's going to feed them unless they're in an institution or something. But when we talk about childhood hunger and that type of thing, let's go to the home. Let's educate people. Let's train people. But
when you say, and I guess what I'm trying to get to is, and if this is even something that you want to talk about now or just let people see as the program launches, what type of training for the community are we talking about? The trusted sources in the community.
From my standpoint, what I want to introduce is a lot of trainings that entail disciplines that are so needed in the community. For example, as simple as it sounds, we have some chess programs that we want to bring in and bring to all of the children in the community. Why chess? Because chess is a discipline that compels you to think before you act. The great majority of the young people in the streets today, they act before they think. So we want to begin a discipline in these children at a very early age. We want to introduce them to new ideas. We want to do it inside the heart of the community. You don't have to take them outside of the community to learn chess, to have chess contests, to have competition in the community in a very positive way. We want people from City Hall, beginning with City Hall, we're beginning with the leadership in the city of Cincinnati to sponsor kids that are involved in positive programs as such. to have competition to the extent of promoting them and preparing them for higher education. We know this is not going to work unless we get the total community involved. So we begin a process out in Winchester, we begin a process out in Westwood. We know that it's not going to work unless the people in Avondale and Evanston and other places in the city of Cincinnati participate also.
So in the training, then, it's not so much the train. So, I'm just, I guess I keep harping on this because I want to be sure that people are clear in the training, especially who may hear this and go, and that are in the communities you're talking about and may actually go, good, is something coming, I'm ready for it. But to understand that you're not going to take a community mom and train her to do the work that the professionals
We're going to take a
do.
community mom and train her and teach her how to diagnose what is taking place with her children and her family and in her community.
So,
because she's better fit, she's better equipped to go into that community and talk to those children. And saying again, it's about trust. People in poor communities like that, black and white, don't trust people outside the communities. One reason is too many of these organizations have failed them historically. Too many of these organizations have come in, spent a lot of money, people got paid big money, and they left. So what we want to do is leave that healing process in the communities with the people who can address it on a daily basis.
but there will also be professionals.
There will be professional people that will be there to help guide them.
To help guide.
Yes.
Okay. And so that way, if someone's coming to the trauma center that may need more care than, say, the neighborhood mom, even though you've trained her to identify in her kids or something, who may need more care or more intense care, there will be professionals that's still involved in the program.
We're just talking about diagnosing.
that.
We're not talking about a healing process. We're not talking about actual treatment. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about being able to understand what's taking place, diagnose it, and then get treatment for them. We want to involve all the different agencies around the city of Cincinnati to partake in this, and in many cases come into the community, to come into the, not have people come outside the community, because that's not happening. That's why all these programs fail, because you expect people to leave outside of the community, and they're not doing that. So you come on inside the community and become a part of this healing process. That will work.
Okay, so once people begin to identify and able to look at and see the symptoms, then from there, that gives the mom or the dad or that community leader the opportunity to reach out now. Mom can reach out to a professional and say, hey, I've noticed these particular behaviors in my child or in a neighbor's kid that I've seen, and at least be able to have that conversation. So I guess it's kind of like creating a network. If I'm trained, but you're not, but I can recognize, and it gives me an opportunity to sit down and talk with you and go, hey, look, this is a situation that took place in my house, and I noticed that my child was doing this. Their lack of interest, they were becoming withdrawn. And what happened was we were able to get help, and I found out that this was going on. And so that kind of becomes that chain where each one teach one.
That's right.
I think that's
and what I think is very important is that people who begin to take responsibility for what takes place in their own household, when they begin to take responsibility, when they start to look and see what's happening to their kids, will take a greater responsibility in how they may be a part of the problem. If you have mothers who are drinking a lot, who are smoking a lot, who are partying a lot and not at home, that may very well be the cause of the behaviors that you find in your young daughter. So it's an opportunity to take a look at yourself also.
Okay. And so we know that it's going to launch, or it should be launching sometime in about a month, give or take a few weeks. What is the process of getting this up and going now?
We're going door to door in these communities. The community outreach team will, and a number of volunteers. We have a lot of people throughout the city of Cincinnati who want to do something other than talk, who want to do more than just talk. They want to be about it. And so we have invited them to come in and go door to door with us and invite people to participate in the healing process. Okay,
so that's something that we should be, we should definitely be looking forward.
We'll be knocking on your door real soon.
And what is the official name of the initiative?
Well, we don't have an official name yet. That's coming. You know, we might allow the people to give it a name. Let them identify what they see coming.
So then what lets me know, and I know you said there's going to be door knocking and whatnot, but let's say I never got the knock, or I wasn't at home, or I was working all the time. What lets me know that this help is in my community now?
We will be promoting it. We will promote, we'll keep the community up to par of what we're doing, what it is our desire to do, the help that will be available to the people. We'll let them know. We'll keep them abreast.
And I know from working with you almost every day that this is something that is this is a passion for
Sure.
you. It's not a fleeting, because I've heard you talk about it and I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that sometimes you hear people talk about what they care about, and they'll go strong for a minute and then it'll drop off and they'll go somewhere else or talk about something else. But I've heard you stay on this, sit in your office, almost bang your head up against the wall. I've seen your heart where you're concerned with the community. You know, I hear you in the meetings, I hear you talk about it, and you're concerned for not just the children, but the community as a whole. And if we are going to survive, then we have to heal, because if we don't heal, it's like with any sickness, any situation, if you don't heal, then you only deteriorate more. And so healing and surviving is important. We have about 4 minutes left. And so what I want to do is give you 3 of those minutes to just talk to the people and tell them, you've been pouring out your heart for 2 shows. That part is a fact. But I want you to take the last 3 minutes and just pour out your heart.
Well, you know, we appeal to the community to recognize that we don't have to continue to go to these funerals every other week for children under the age of 20, 25 years old. We don't have to continue to send watch our children down at the Justice Center and visit them there, or at the local prisons. And we don't have to continue to do that if we would just do what we can do. Sometimes you don't have to do a lot. Sometimes it just takes you to be that vehicle that we need to reach a number of other people to get things done. If everyone just takes it upon themselves to just do what they can do, we can be successful. We got doctors, we got lawyers, we have physicians, we have so many different professional people, but we need the common man, the common woman, the common people, what we call common, but just the natural people, the people who are out every day who are witnessing these things and want to make a change. We have been so disappointed by so many failed programs. We have poured millions and millions and millions of dollars into these programs, and it has done nothing. We see no results. If we invest in these human beings, if we invest in the community, if we invest in the people, we'll be successful. We truly believe that. I truly believe that, you know. But you have to believe that in order for it to work. So please join us, be a part of this.
Listen, thanks, Rashid. Definitely for enlightening us, giving us information. I'm praying for the major success, because it's something that's needed. It's something that's needed in the community, and especially something that's going to personally touch and hopefully inspire the community to rise up, to get help, to try to identify. And if we wait for someone else to make the change in our community, it'll never come.
It's not going to happen.
It's not going to come. So thank you again. Listen, we want to thank you for taking out time again, as I like to say. I truly want to thank Rashid for coming out. The information is important. I know from hearing him, we still did not touch. There's so much more to be said about this initiative. But you can reach out to him. I know we'll put up information on how you can reach him if you have questions, if you have ideas, if you have concerns. Give him a call. Talk to him. Our communities are what's at risk or what's at stake.
Our children.
Our children. Your children, my children. And if we don't do it, we cannot sit around and complain that someone else does it. So until next week, stay faithful, stay healthy.